Today in Food Bites, we're visiting the Agriplex and the Western Fair to see the work of the growing chefs. Hope you enjoyed this one.
Hello, I'm Alana Guslitz. I'm the Garden Program Coordinator here at Growing Chefs Ontario. Today we are in our Agriplex garden that's here at the Western Fair District. And I'm talking to Luis a little bit about myself, my journey in agriculture, as well about all the amazing things I get to do working at Growing Chefs and different ways we're bringing food education to everybody. So a bit about myself. I'm originally here from London, Ontario, but I went to university in Halifax. I actually studied Middle Eastern politics, and then I took a little break and when I finished university, and I did some volunteering abroad on some farms, and I really liked it. I worked with Slow Foods, which is an international organization in the Caribbean, and got to establish school gardens, and it was amazing and I loved it. So I came back to Canada and did a farming apprenticeship under Michael Abelman at Foxglove Farm on Salt Spring Island in BC, and that was a great learning opportunity. I got to be involved in every aspect of the farm, and I especially loved doing the farmers markets and working with the chickens. I did not like doing the irrigation so much and some of the other jobs, but it was really great to learn every aspect of farming. And then I got an amazing opportunity after that to work for an organization that Michael Abelman, who was my mentor, co-founded in Vancouver called Soul Food Street Farms, which is just an amazing project and something I would love to see come to London, which is a social enterprise that produces beautiful, organically grown food in underutilized vacant spaces in the downtown east side of Vancouver, and is an organization that employs folks who are living right there in the downtown east side. So I was the distribution coordinator. I got to work with all the fancy restaurants and get them to support our cause and support our amazing staff by buying produce and running our farmers markets as well. And that was another great learning opportunity in the world of urban agriculture. So working at Soul Food Street Farms definitely shaped a lot about how I feel about growing food. Food is a human right, about employment, access to green space, urban agriculture. It really changed a lot of the way that I see the world. And one of the most important aspects of the organization is the employment of folks from the downtown east side with no strings attached. So sobriety was not required, housing was not required, they didn't need a permanent address. A lot of the barriers that exist, even in organizations doing the best they can here in London, they often have a lot of barriers to employment or even barriers to volunteering. And so working at Soul Foods, I really saw the struggles that come with that model and also the amazing rewards. For example, there are staff that have been working there for over 10 years now who have secured permanent housing, and their lives have been completely transformed, and they're now managers of specific farm sites. So I really do believe in that model, and it created a beautiful place to work that also had a lot of its own struggles as well. Growing in an urban environment, there's always going to be a lot more theft, a lot more vandalism, but because our community knew our mission, and we had lots of signage explaining that, and our staff were really protective of the farm, that was not our major issue. The biggest issue was working in a downtown environment. You've got pavement, so you're in a really extreme heat sink. The hot Vancouver summers are even hotter when you're working right on pavement, and we were growing in big recycled plastic containers, so those are also getting really hot. So irrigation, the amount of water we were using was really important to be on top of, because things dry out really quickly in that kind of environment. But the benefit of it was it's completely portable, so the containers were specifically designed and manufactured by a recycles plastic company for Soul Foods so that they could be forklifted. So there's forklift inserts right in the bottom of the containers, and those came really in handy in my second year working there when we had to move an entire half-acre farm beside the stadium across False Creek. So we moved an entire functioning farm to a new site. And again, by using underutilized vacant spaces, those don't exist forever in an urban setting. Developers buy them, they want them for parking. There's different multi-uses for these spaces. So being mobile was really, really helpful to the operation, and it allowed us to get leases in places that didn't want to commit to more than a few years. So again, that's a model that I think in London, we've got a lot of really underutilized urban space, and it might be planned or slated for development, but it sits for 5 to 10 years. Or we've got a lot of brown sites where it's paved, like an old gas station, for example, or old dump sites where the soil is contaminated. But if you're growing in a separated container, in a raised bed, a container with fresh organic soil brought in, you can be using those underutilized vacant spaces. And that's an example of something that we're doing here at the Western Fair, where some of the soil might be contaminated from past uses. We're able to grow in raised beds totally separate from that contaminated soil.
So how big are these containers? Are like this 4x4, like I guess?
Yeah, so the containers are about 1 meter by 1 meter, which is what my metric conversions are great. It's about 3.5 feet by, it's about 4x4. So they're pretty small, but they're run in rows. So it really feels like a farm. There's irrigation lines and sprinkler systems going down the rows. The rows were the standard kind of size that you would see at an organic market farm. We were growing in blocks, so you'd have, a salad block, you would have a fruiting crop block. We also used those same plastic containers to grow inside of the greenhouses as well. So there was large unheated greenhouses utilizing those containers. So they were really multi-use, and they lasted a really, really long time. In comparison, the original site of Soul Foods was built just out of old lumber beside the Astoria Hotel, and that had to be rebuilt constantly, and eventually it got replaced with the plastic growing containers. So after working in Vancouver for Soul Foods for 2 years, I really missed my family close by here in Ontario. So I moved a bit closer to Toronto, and I worked for a year as the youth program coordinator for Green Thumbs Growing Kids, which is a great organization that works out of Regent Park, Cabbagetown, East End area of Toronto, that has school gardens, established school gardens that they facilitate programming in and do school workshops. And so I worked with the teenagers, and we were able to employ a few of them over the summer. We did farmers markets. It was really, really fun, and that's a really great, vibrant neighborhood of Toronto with some schools that really, really could use the food supports and really could use that aspect of outdoor education, because a lot of folks in that area have never visited a farm before, have never seen how a tomato grows, just because it's right there in the urban center. So that was a great place to be working. So after working for a year in Toronto for Green Thumbs Growing Kids, I wanted to move back to London, be closer to my family here, because I was about to start a family of my own. And I looked around and saw who's doing urban agriculture, who's doing education with kids, and I saw that there was a chapter of Growing Chefs right here in London, which was amazing because the original chapter of Growing Chefs, the only other one, started in Vancouver in BC. And so I already was familiar with the organization because Growing Chefs in BC would bring children from schools on tours of the farm at Soul Foods. So Growing Chefs in BC is really volunteer run. Lots of chefs volunteer and farmers to give education to kids through school programs all about growing and cooking delicious food. So it's a funny coincidence that there was a chapter in Vancouver where I used to work and a chapter here in London where I was moving back to. So Andrew Fleet, who's the executive director and co-founder of the Growing Chefs here in London, he actually worked in fine dining in Vancouver for years. We probably overlapped a little bit and we didn't even know it. And he was a volunteer chef for Growing Chefs in Vancouver, and he loved it there. He's also originally from London, so when he moved back with his wife to start his family here, they co-founded a chapter of Growing Chefs right here in London. So Andrew and his wife moved back to London here and started a chapter of Growing Chefs just through volunteer work. They've worked out of many locations, many trunks of their cars. Andrew volunteered a lot of his time, and one of our original volunteers as well, Catherine, is now Chef Catherine, the head executive chef here at Growing Chefs. So she was the first employee after Andrew to join the team, and from there it's really grown. We have a staff of over 15 full-time employees now, and we are in 2 locations. We've got our headquarters at King and Maitland in the old Auberge de Petit Prince building, and we for 3 years now have been here at the Western Fair in the new Grove Agricultural Hub. It's an agri-food hub where there's lots of businesses. Growing Chefs was one of the first ones to move in there over the pandemic, and we've got a huge, beautiful, dedicated teaching space, as well as a commercial kitchen where we're able to run our school lunch programs, and we've got all these beautiful garden spaces we have access to thanks to the amazing team at the Western Fair and Dan Lismore's landscaping team. So a little bit about Growing Chefs before I get a bit dive deep into our gardens. Growing Chefs is a not-for-profit. We are a charity that teaches kids, families, the whole community all about growing and cooking healthy food from scratch, supporting local as much as we can, and growing as much as we can. So I run the garden programs with the help of a garden program assistant, and together we maintain these beautiful garden spaces. We do children's programming, and we do a lot of community work. So the garden is a really great place for therapeutic work, for smaller groups, for folks who are still not comfortable working back indoors. It was really great over the pandemic to have so much garden space because a lot of our volunteers come from vulnerable sectors, and they were able to come back and volunteer and have that interaction after being so isolated in the safety of the beautiful outdoors. We're also able to provide volunteer opportunities to different folks who often face barriers to accessing meaningful volunteer work, be it due to mental health issues, addiction, differing abilities. So we're really, really lucky to be able to offer so much garden programming now with our expanded gardens. Our culinary programs are amazing. They're so much fun, and they're very popular. So our school programs, we do both in-school programs where our chefs and educators go to schools. We work with every single class. We visit them 2 times, and we do amazing curriculum-based lessons all around preparing food right there in the classroom and all around our food systems. So we really always bring home the lessons of our local and our global food systems, the impacts that our choices make, and the impacts that us as a community can have on our local and global food systems. So as well as our in-school programs, we do field trips right here to our education kitchen at the Grove, where classes come and they get hands-on right in our teaching kitchen and help prepare a meal from start to finish. They get to come out to the gardens and learn about how food grows, harvest fresh ingredients, bring them back to the kitchen, prepare a beautiful meal with the help of our education chefs, and then sit down and enjoy it together, and even learn about waste. We are so lucky here at the Grove at the Western Fair to have a worm farm beneath our feet, run by Dan Lismore's amazing landscaping team here at the Western Fair. So all of our food waste, even our weeds from our garden, all of our food waste from our kitchens goes to feeding those worms, and in return we get beautiful organic compost that we add to our gardens, and you'll see it really helps our gardens grow beautifully. So we get to illustrate right to kids and community groups that visit us this full circle food system that we are a part of. It's hyper local, and nothing can ever be zero waste, but it's as little waste as possible. And we see the benefits of it as well. So we really love showing that this can be a viable economy that can really expand. So we're so lucky to have all of these resources here at the Western Fair. And And it's really amazing to see because the Western Fair's original roots has always been agriculture. It started off as an agricultural fair, you know, who can grow the biggest pumpkin, who's got the most beautiful heifer. And over time, you know, the rides at the Western Fair have become very popular. There's now horse racing in the casino. They've really diversified their operations, but they're really bringing back that history and roots of the agricultural aspects with the Grove as an agri-food hub, as well as supporting amazing tenant projects like the Hutton House, Grow Towers that are our neighbors in the Grove, as well as the Wormery Project and Growing Chefs Gardens. So it's really amazing to see them celebrate that history as an agricultural fair and really be going back to those roots while still having a really diverse offerings of entertainment opportunities. So I get to do so many amazing things in my role here as the garden program coordinator at Growing Chefs. I get to give tours of our gardens, I get to educate the community about growing food, but one of the things I'm the most passionate about is our food box program that we started as a pilot 2 years ago in collaboration with the Ontario Student Nutrition Program Southwest Region, where we provide bi-weekly fresh food harvested from right here in our gardens directly to families in need that are identified through school support workers. So on our end, it's completely anonymous. It really respects the dignity and access that these families need. Most of them are newcomers and they might already be accessing the food bank or other emergency supports, but it's just not enough to get them by. So we are able to provide these fresh food boxes directly to them through school support workers who they already trust, who they already access language supports, mental health supports through, and there's a lot more uptake of those other supports knowing that they're also getting these amazing food supports. And we do our best to grow as many culturally relevant crops as we can because most of these families are newcomers who are looking for fresh greens, certain herbs, certain fruiting crops that they want to be using in their recipes. These families have extremely high food literacy, so all they need is a little bit of help of access to those really fresh ingredients to make their cultural foods. And for me, it's very special because I studied Middle Eastern politics in university. I'm very passionate about it, and I get to grow these foods where I already know the names in Arabic for families who are coming here from places like Syria and Lebanon and Turkey, and we're growing, you know, Turkish varieties of eggplant and molokhia and Lebanese za'atar and all these really fun things right here in our climate, as well as harvesting things wild like sumac that are used both in this part of the world and that part of the world. So it's just really beautiful bringing together two of my interests, which is food security, food sovereignty, as well as history and politics. So that is my favorite program, and we've been really lucky with the help and support of so many sponsors and donors, including the Western Fair and in-kind sponsorship through the food bank of our beautiful Hoop House, and so many other sponsors have allowed us to continue this program into a second year. And the more we can grow, the more families that are ready for our support. So I'd really love to see our gardens expand and this program expand, because it's really getting to the food to folks who really see it as very valuable and really relevant to their lives. So at Growing Chefs, we try to grow everything with the smallest footprint possible, doing the least damage to the environment as we can. So we grow everything with completely organic practices, and we utilize what's called integrated pest management. So whenever people have questions about the garden, their number one question is how to get rid of pests. And my answer to them is always, unfortunately, you can't. You can't always get rid of pests, but you can work together with the environment to do your best to still get a really great harvest. So one example of a pest we have here at Growing Chefs is a very hungry groundhog. And we've got things like kohlrabi growing right here and collard greens that the groundhog just loves to come take a little nibble of. What we try and do is we know where the groundhog lives. We try and grow things close to him that he likes to eat. For example, they love brassicas. They love these collard greens. and it lives just beyond this fence. So we kind of have sacrificial crops. I always recommend to people grow more than you need and grow some sacrificial crops, because those pests are going to come, especially in an urban environment. Things like squirrels, birds, groundhogs, we've got them. And we're not going to get rid of them, but we can work together to still get a lot of food for us and share a little bit with them. We're really lucky here too at the Western Fair. There's hawks that live on site. So that really helps us with a lot of the smaller rodents that you might get in an urban environment. But we also get a lot of pest pressure, especially in the heat of the summer, in our greenhouse and our hoop house, from different bugs. So aphids, spider mites, thrips, we get lots of different pests, but we use, like I said, integrated pest management. So we have a lot of tools in our tool belt that are all organic that we can help control the pests.
That's awesome. Oh, stay right there, please. That's the $1 million shot. Look at that.
So an adult one right here.
So,
Yeah. So we, like I said, use integrated pest management. So when we notice some aphid pressure right here on our beautiful sweet peppers, we do things like introducing predator insects like ladybugs, lacewings, praying mantises. We use a variety of kind of all around predators that target all sorts of different kinds of bugs. And those ladybugs, mantises, they don't eat our plants, they eat the pests that are eating our plants. So things like aphids and spider mites, even mealybugs. We also use what's called diatomaceous earth, which is just crushed up seashells. It's this white powder here. It acts almost like a fiberglass and cuts up the bodies of soft-shelled insects and does not damage the plants at all. And it also is completely food safe, so it can be rinsed right off of vegetables. You might be familiar with it if you've ever had a cockroach issue. Diatomaceous earth is used for that. It's also used as cattle feed to give them some calcium. So it's completely food safe, and it's a great tool we use here. Oh, that one hatched. Like that. And then look at our French
look at that big
melons.
one.
And the ladybugs are all hanging out underneath. It must be nice and wet in there.
Oh, that's
Yeah, we've got
awesome.
a couple over here too.
Oh, come on, it's full
So
of
these are
ladybugs.
like the Chanteray French melons. Michael Abelman always grew these, and so I was like, I'm going to grow them this year. So here we are at Growing Chefs at the Grove. We've got some beautiful garden beds out here full of lots of edible flowers and herbs, because sometimes we have culinary programs where they don't have time to go all the way to our gardens, but they're still able to come out here and have a sensory experience, smell different varieties of basil, pick edible flowers to garnish their plates with, and just learn about some different varieties of crops right here outside of our door.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever you're
Hi,
ready.
I'm Chef Matt. This is Growing Chefs at the Grove. I'm one of the lead education chefs here at Growing Chefs. My background is I graduated from Fanshawe College, and I worked in the restaurant industry here in London for almost 15 years, spending some time working in restaurants as well as teaching at Fanshawe College. In the later years, I was lucky enough to get to do a little bit of traveling to Nova Scotia and work at a restaurant out there. And then I found my home about a year and a half ago here at Growing Chefs after volunteering and doing some events for some time. I became a full-time member of the team, and I'm so honored and happy to work here for this awesome organization at our location here at the Grove.
How is to work with kids and teaching about real food, like the growing part?
For sure, yeah. We're really lucky. We get to do kind of the best of both worlds as far as I'm concerned, where not only do we get to use amazing local food, but we get to teach all about it and work with young minds, which is fantastic because I'm a very curious person, but there's nothing like the curiosity of the kids that we get to work with. So it's really, really great. It's an awesome organization, and love getting to work with them.
Right now, the Ontario program of school is including food education. What that means for you guys?
That's right. It means a great deal for us because we've been able to get in and we're doing a lot of education in the schools. And I feel like it's amazing to see how we're kind of coming back to our roots now, if you will, where fresh local food is becoming much more important. And I mean, it is the basis of everything. It is incredibly important for so many things we could go on about. But it's really, really amazing to see that we're getting back to that on an education level across the board. If you haven't checked it out, you can find out on the Thames Valley District School Board. We have some fun videos of math on the move. You can reach out, growingchefsontario.ca. We have our pizza nights. We do different events, private cooking classes, all kinds of different fun things coming up. So please stay tuned. And if you haven't yet, sign up for our newsletter. Again, growingchefsontario.ca.
Thank you very much, Chef. Have a good one.
We say goodbye to Chef Matt, and we went to the trucks, just another quick drive away. We did wanted to show the first greenhouse that the growing chef were growing on. This one is inside of the truck. It's a heated one. It has a nice ventilation system, but sadly, our microphones and camera were running low of battery by that moment. So I hope you enjoyed this visit to the growing chefs. And at the end of that day was a really big storm coming. You will see it at the end. Hope you enjoyed this one. Have a good one.